The very first thing that we do is an ancient tradition called Kriya. So to get set, Peter Krantz of Omnisville Mortuary is going to help me with ribbons, but he may need some help. So Natalie, Bill's sister, right here. So actually, Peter, if you'll pin everybody on the right, on the other side, except for the three, except for, yes. Yeah, the son. So Sam, you can do Elizabeth next. Then Rebecca and Sarah.
Daughters, right? So you go on a different side. You want on the inside lapel? Or outside, I think. Sorry, this, you can transfer it anytime.
Where's your brother? And then Nena and Andres, if you would like. And Gabriel also, if you would like. Just indicate who you are to Peter.
On a jacket or a shirt? You can transfer it, okay?
Today, the world works in a highly predictable, highly repetitive manner. Every single day, the sun rises in the east, sets in the west, every day. And for many of you, your dad, your brother's presence in this world, from the day you got here, is a given, like the sun that rises. And for you, his presence over these last number of years is a given every day, like the sun that rises, the sun that sets. The truth is, whether or not you saw him every day, well, most of you pretty much saw him every day. His presence in this world is a given. It's a constant. And the world is now fundamentally different. You would know that it was different. It's raining. But it's fundamentally a different world than you have ever known. And the tradition teaches us to mark that change when our world is torn from the way it has always been by tearing our clothing. The old days, we didn't have a closet full of clothes, we would tear our clothes. Ironically, now that everybody has lots of clothing, we tear a ribbon. We tear to acknowledge that there's been a rip, that there is something asunder in the world the way that we have always known it, the world that we have come to rely on. The old tradition, if you can imagine, at the end of the week, one is supposed to sew up the rip. And the rules are clear that even if you're a tailor or a seamstress, you're not allowed to sew it in such a way that a person couldn't see the repairing on the garment. But if you imagine if you saw somebody that you hadn't seen for a long time, and no Facebook and email and telephones, and it's not like the seat of your pants for a knee, you would look at them and you would know that they carried on them a scar to show that the world had been torn. And please God, you all will be blessed with much long life together as family and community. It will always be a place where you can touch. I would ask each of you if you will take your two hands and take the two corners of the ribbon on the bottom, and if you pull one forward and one back to tear it, if you need help, I'm happy to help. Perfect. Really hard to pull. Bring down this. And there's a blessing. There's a blessing that we ask you to recite to reflect that tear in this transition. I would invite all of those with the ribbon, if you would, to please repeat after me. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam dayan ha'emet. And the rest of us say Amen.
Amen.
You guys can all have a seat if you would like. Thank you, Peter. We begin with the prophet Job. Adonai Natan, Adonai Lakach, Yishem Adonai Mevorach. God has given us a precious gift, priceless gift. On a May Day, just a little shy of 6.5 decades ago, God took a piece of God's self, a piece of pure light, a neshama, a soul, and God breathed it into the clay of this earth. And for that now complete lifetime, those two pieces live together in the same space. Those two pieces are the Bill that we know, that we love, for whom we mourn. Serve from the world beyond, embody in this world, blessed to live in this world, blessed to know life and love, blessed to bring new life into this world. It's remarkable, and it deserves to be said from the very outset for Farmer Bill, that the first commandment given to human beings is true or vu miluet aretz, to be fruitful and multiply and fill up the earth. Bill lived his whole life in that double blessing. He lived it as a parent, the way we normally understand the command, the limitless blessing of being part of bringing new life into this world, in nurturing and raising and loving and caring and teaching and protecting. Bill also was fruitful in the work that he did every day, because he literally made this world more beautiful, with more food, more air to breathe, scented. It's remarkable if one begins with the immeasurable blessing of the three of you, and then adds to it a truly uncountable number of shoots and saplings and seedlings of new life that sustain this world that Bill brought in over the course of his lifetime. And now, tragically for us, the time has come for those two pieces to separate. May God's name be blessed. We gather together today to take care of those two pieces that we only know together. The soul of the world beyond, the body of this soul. The body of this world. We come to take care of his soul. We will offer words of tradition, words of memory and praise, and ultimately words of prayer, that his soul should speedily ascend to return back to the world from which it came. And having done that, we will, with great love and reverence, return his body, the container for that soul in this lifetime. We will return his body back to the soil from which it came. We begin with words of tradition. I want to share a piece, Psalm 18. The Psalm acknowledges that this world is so blessed. We meet a person who gave love and was blessed to receive so much love. We meet a person who gave life and was blessed to share and receive so much life. Acknowledge all of those gifts in the context of the light that is the soul, that reflects divine light and that brings blessing. אם חסי תתחסד, אם דבר תמים תתמם, אם נבן תתברר, ואם עיקש תתבטל. כי אתה עמוני תושיע, ועיניים רמות תשפיל, כי אתה תאיר נרי, אדוני אלוהי, יגיע השקיעי. כי בך ארץ גדוד, ובאלוהי אדלג שור, ואל תמים דרכו, אם רק אדוני צירופה, מגן הוא לכל החוסים בו. I want to share as well a piece from the middle of the 34th Psalm. In the middle of the 34th Psalm, the poet turns to his children. He says, "Gather together, my children. I will teach you what it means to live rightfully, to live righteously. For who is the person who truly loves life? It is the one who loves every day. Every day as an opportunity to see something good." The psalm says, "Let such a person guard their tongue from speaking poorly, their lips from being deceitful. Let them turn from bad and do good. Desire peace, pursue it." I'm going to read the opening 2 lines and then invite Maurice Lazard, a long time, a very dear friend to Bill and the family, to chant the rest. "Lechuvanim shimuli, yirat Adonai alameichem.
Mi ha'ish echofetz chayim, ohev yamim lirato. Shechofetz chayim, ohev yamim lirato. Nitzor leshon chamera, ושפתיך מדבר מרמה. צור מרב עשה טוב, בקש שלום ברודפהו. נצור לשון חמרה, ושפתיך מדבר מרמה. צור מרב עשה טוב, בקש שלום ברודפהו.
Finally, we share as well the words of the 23rd Psalm. You have the 23rd Psalm written on the pamphlet you were handed as you walked down this afternoon. It's a psalm that we so associate with our saddest days, places like this. We often recite the psalm without reading the psalm. For it's not a sad psalm. It's not, God forbid, a psalm about loss or about death. It's the opposite. It understands the world actually in the way your dad, the way Bill understood the world. It's a beautiful meadow nourished by a river. A world of feasting, of family and friends. A world with so much goodness that we are each anointed as if we were nobility. And the psalm understands that sometimes this world is hard. Sometimes we gather together to feast, and there are those who come before us as enemies. And sometimes we find ourselves in exactly this place, this valley of the shadow of death. But the psalm says, do not be afraid. Do not be afraid, because this world is so filled with blessings that the cup of blessing overflows. The world is so filled with goodness. The goodness chases after us to be part of our lives. We're at the end of the psalm. The promise of the psalm, perhaps the most important lesson that it could teach us, the one that Bill lived his life teaching us, is that we live in a world where life wins. The story doesn't end. The people do not leave us. The promise at the end of the psalm is those with whom we share this lifetime, in the closest of intimacies, in the deepest of loves, that they will remain with us and continue to live with us forever and with no limits. And we will with they. I invite you, if you would, to read along with me in the having shared words of the tradition, we take a few moments to share words of memory and of praise. We know that it's not possible. We know that it's not possible if we're going to stand here and tell all the stories that we know, to fully recreate such a beautiful lifetime, such a rich and colorful person. We could stand here for 64 years, tell all the stories that we know, we would still come up short. In fact, we do a disservice to such a rich and beautiful lifetime as Bill's when we limit it to 64, a few months shy of 65 years. The math is correct. But that's only true as you count the numbers as the year turns over each year on January 1st. But Bill didn't live his life quite so simply as one day after the next on a calendar. And though those 64 years are correct math, he lived them always in context, intersecting together with the people who mattered the most to him. So he lived 64 years in his own shoes or boots. But he shared that entire lifetime with his beloved sister. He shared more than another century as the father to each of the three of you. Blessed over these last number of years to add his life to yours, Elizabeth, to children, Gabriel. So I don't even know how to do the math, but just those seated right here, 64 years is now over 300. And that ignores all those who are standing around me, those that I recognize. I know that you have known Bill for decades and loved him so, And I have no idea how to do the math for those who are on Facebook. But what we take to be 64 years of life is 64 years of time, but millennia of life. So what we do now by telling these stories is not to be able to recapture or to faithfully represent so much and so beautiful. What we do now, we do to honor him, to honor his beautiful life, and to bring us comfort. Begin by inviting his daughter Rebecca to please share a few words.
So let's get one thing out of the way. Dad would not have liked a 1 p.m. service. It is right in the middle of the workday. Sorry, Dad. I was prepared for the community to mourn a loss like Dad's. But what I wasn't prepared for was the communities within the communities. Today, beside you, we have our nursery family. That's a community that Dad built. There are Dad's other children that he adopted. There are the communities of faith who have worshipped alongside of him. There are the communities of gardeners. There are the communities of people who believe in agriculture and sustainability. There are the communities of people who could not wait for a certain season and tomatoes to be released. There's also the community of Elizabeth and her family, and Aunt Natalie and all the people who love her. There's the community of all the elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools us kids went to. There's the community of Dad's classmates who went to Madison with him. And then there's the community of people who shared his lifelong passion in agriculture, his fellow nurserymen, the vendors, the suppliers, the distributors, the salespeople. Dad would see these individual nursery folk here today, and he'd try to gather you all together and tell you, why don't we meet except at funerals? And then when he would meet with you, he would try to get the band back together and reform the chapter. And then he would try to get us to go back in time to go play volleyball at Nithings. And to go at trade shows in Las Vegas and get 99-cent buffets. And talk about whoever bought the 99-cent buffet, how cheap they were. What this means to say is a loss like this is made easier with thousands of shoulders to help us carry it. I thought a lot about what I would say today. And get comfortable. I'm Dad's daughter. We're going to be here for a minute. You knew what kind of extraordinary person Dad was. You knew that he started the business when he was 16, and tens and thousands of people have come through. You likely know how Dad was a knowledgeable nurseryman. And in his 64 years, Dad accomplished feats that it will take me the rest of my days to even begin to comprehend. But what you might not have known is there was another community. There was a community of neighbors, people who were just physically nearby, who became brothers to Dad. Most everyone knows the nursery side of things. And so I thought I would share maybe some things you didn't know. So Dad came from a really small family. No cousins. It was him and Aunt Natalie and Grandma and Grandpa. And Dad came from a really quiet household. They played classical music. And he would look at other people's houses full of noise and clamoring and think, you know what, when I do it, that's what I want. And that was his definition of success. Dad was also our father, and so I thought maybe I could share with you things that we knew of him as our dad. Dad loved fresh squeezed orange juice. He loved bagels and cream cheese and lox. He had a beautiful, rich singing voice. and he could play so many instruments. He played the guitar, the violin, the piano, the clarinet. A couple months ago, he told me, though, if he could play any instrument, it would be the saxophone, because it was the coolest of all instruments. He was a skilled woodworker, he was a passionate cook, and he had a million ways of engaging the world that you might not have seen. He would secretly pay for the meal of a senior citizen who was dining out by themselves. But he wouldn't stop there. He would tack dessert on for them to take home. He would stop at a table of Girl Scout cookies, and he would ask for a case. And the girl would hand him a box. And he would say, "No, you misunderstand me. I want a case." And the girl would look at him and realize he wanted the box that the boxes came in. And he would stand with them, helping them do the math as their eyes got wide, that he was going to take home that many Girl Scout cookies. When I was little, we had employees who lived across the border, and some of them didn't have indoor plumbing. And Dad made sure that they did, even if he had to install it himself. Dad was busy, but about once a year, he would sit down and play Legos with us. And he would have us pull every Lego out. And we would build things, and it was so detailed, and it took us hours. And we would stay up way past our bedtime. We would use every single piece. He would send us to find more pieces. He would send us to find train tracks and animal figurines. And at the end of it, we would be delirious. We'd be like, "Can we go to bed, please?" And he would stay up and he would finish. Who else but Dad could exhaust a child by playing? And we'd wake up the next morning, he'd be gone for work, and we'd beg our mom, "Please, don't mess with the Legos." There wasn't a lot of room in the mobile home, but don't mess with the Legos, because we could see his detailed builds. He would have a train car that was stacked with little gray bricks that were supposed to be bags of cement. His imagination created a space where everything was used. And then you would walk out the door of the mobile home and we were surrounded by a space where everything was used. Dad had a landscaping route for years. He was good at it, but he didn't really love it. He said it was something he had to do to pay the bills, to make sure he could keep the nursery running, and one day he would be able to be at the nursery full time. He always said to me, "You do the thing you have to do in order to get to do the thing you want to do." As he entered into his 60s, he was just getting to that point, being able to do the things he wanted to do. Dad hated leaving a job unfinished, yes, because he had promised a customer, but because it would mess up his meticulous schedule. It would throw off the to-do list that he updated each night. He would revise and cross out, and he had this handwriting that I don't know how many people in this world could decipher. I think there's 3 of us. That notebook was a ledger against the one thing he never had enough of: time. I can remember a Friday in the mid-90s. It was late summer, and we were on an irrigation job, and he was frustrated with a pipe he couldn't get right. We were there until nearly 7 when he figured it out. His Levi jeans and his white Reeboks were caked in mud. We went straight to services after the job. We didn't stop at home. We didn't change. And so we took a newspaper, and we sat in the furthest back row, and we put newspaper under our seat and newspaper under our feet to keep our mess to a minimum. And I remember looking at him, being so proud of this mud-covered man. He was showing God that his prayer was through his work as much as it was with a prayer book in hand. He was showing God that he was going to do more than his halfway part to demonstrate his commitment to the dreams that he believed in. And he showed us that in every minute. He was who his actions told you he was. There was no problem he couldn't solve, and if he couldn't in the moment, he'd outwork it, wear it down, and he'd bend it to his will. He'd outlast it, but he'd never force it. Being Dad's kid, when he would get behind you for something you were interested in, it was like harnessing hurricane winds You better learn how to sail. In the 5th grade, I learned about checking accounts. At the dinner table that night, I shared that I wanted one. Most parents would say, well, that's nice. When you grow up, you can have one. Not Dad. There was one small problem. No bank in town is going to give a 10-year-old a checking account. If it hadn't been a regulated industry, I'm pretty sure Dad would have just opened a bank. But as fate would have it, a few months into this big quest, Dad landscaped the home of a bank president. It was a new bank. They solved the problem. The bank president said to him, well, you know, Bill, if there's ever anything I can do for you. And Dad said, well, I'm glad you said that. He said, I will move every account I have to your bank, provided you give my 10-year-old her own checking account with no co-signature. And he did it. He made it happen. But it didn't stop there. We'd be out picking up product at Moning's or Butler's Mill or PB Gardens. And he'd turn to me and he'd say, hey, do you have your checkbook? And I'd nod and he'd say, you know what, I just don't think I've got enough. Do you think you could front me and then when we get back, I'll cover you? And I'd be like, oh yeah, I'm happy to write a check. He gave me the opportunity to practice and be responsible. And that was Dad too. Whether you were ready for it or not, he would go out of his way to make a full-sized tool available to you. Now, what you did with that tool, that was up to you. That's our jumping off point. He has given us full-size tools, and this is our turn to figure out where our real life and our grit begins. For 6 decades, the man outworked recessions and droughts, grief and change. Nothing couldn't be figured out if you were smart enough or outworked if you weren't. Disease is tricky though, because there's no answer. And it doesn't reward how hard you work, how big your dreams are, or how important your to-do list is. Nevertheless, during the last few years, Dad's energy level was still a superpower. He would sit only for meals, haircuts, religious services, and treatment. And at all of those except meals, he would fall asleep. Sorry, Rabbi. As the disease progressed, the appointments turned into hospital stays. Elizabeth and I would be there with him, and I'd look over at him, and he'd be on his phone in the hospital bed. He'd be doing a couple of things. He'd either be checking the nursery cameras, he'd be looking at the Craigslist free section, or, my favorite, he'd be watching heavy machinery videos on YouTube. He liked the ones where people did dumb things, like they would take a $1 million digger and they would park it on really soft ground overnight and it would sink. And he'd holler over to me, look at this idiot, and then he'd tell me what they should do to get out of their jam. Some of Dad's best stories, and Marcel can attest to this, involve narrowly avoiding some sort of disaster. I will always see Dad in a few places, bounding down the driveway with 25 keys on a ring jangling at his side, 2 notebooks and paperwork under his arm, those white Reeboks, those blue Levi's, a green nursery shirt, yellow measuring tape suspenders, his hat, in his pocket, a bunch of cashews or almonds. He was ready to challenge, drive, push, inspire, and take on the world. I'll also see him in his workshop, covered in sawdust, building or more likely repairing something. But mostly I will remember him, like hundreds of thousands of others, bustling behind the nursery counter, hands busy, telling a joke, answering the phone, hovering over soil tests, ready to hand me a task to take a dish in the house. But when there was a long line of customers, he'd yell out loud, "There's my wonderful daughter. Hey, sweetheart." Everyone associates Dad with the nursery, and I thought I was a smart kid, and I said to him one day, "Dad, if you didn't own a nursery, what would you have done?" I thought I'd stump him. Without missing a beat, he said, "Well, one of 2 things. I would have either been a rabbi or a bartender." And it hit me. That counter was his pulpit. Plants were how he ministered. It was a way for him to listen. It was a way for him to connect. There were people who wrote in messages about how Dad sponsored them through treatment. gave them a place to live when they were experiencing homelessness. The bartender part was a way that he could make somebody laugh, even if only for a minute. And that bar was the bar where everyone knew Bill's name. Everyone thinks of Dad as a gardener, but in truth, he was a builder and he was a creator. My hope now is that his spirit is off creating and building where he was happiest, operating a backhoe or freewheeling it in a bobcat. And now with this next chapter, he's free of the increasing and frustrating limits that age and disease and the city and modernization had settled him with. Daddy, you were a living testament that hard work can make dreams come true, that life is just plain easier when you live with a pure heart, that you give the moment you have with someone your full attention, and how to harness every gift you're given and make it into something special.
Thank you, Rebecca. Beautiful. Invite up as well Bill's sister Natalie to share a few words.
That was quite a talk there. Not quite that. Anyway, hi everybody. I wrote a letter to my brother and I wanted to share it with you. My dearest brother, thank you for being the brother that you were. You were the best. You always made me make sure that I was okay. You were always so much fun to be around. You always made me laugh. You took very good care of me, just as you promised Dad. He would be so proud of you. You were an awesome dad. Becca, Sam, Sarah are just wonderful. Awesome job on our nursery. It will live on forever, just like you. Thank you for everything. I will miss you, and I will love you forever.
Thank you, Natalie. You're beautifully done. We invite up as well Elizabeth's son Andres to share a few words to honor and remember Bill.
So I first met Bill when I was in middle school. My mom and I were going through some tough times. And Bill, without knowing us, opened the doors of his home to us. He also gave my mom a job so that we could get back on our feet. After some time had passed, I remember out of nowhere, my mother and Bill would sometimes pick me up from work at night together. And I started getting suspicious and said something's going on here. This is when my mother and Bill started to go out on some dates together. And being a young teen and very attached to my mom, I gotta admit I became jealous thinking that he was gonna steal my mommy away from me. Now whenever I think back to that, I just laugh about how I handled the situation. I remember one day Bill even asked to have a private, formal conversation with me where he told me that he really liked my mom and wanted to date her. More time had passed and we grew closer together. I could see that my mom was very happy because Bill gave her the love, respect, and care that I have never seen someone give my mom before. He treated me just the same. He always looked out for me and gave me advice throughout my teenage years, all the way until now. I viewed him as a father figure because he taught me that you always gotta show respect and care for everyone around you, and that in life you gotta work hard to accomplish your goals. I will never forget all the projects that I got to help him with. Even at times where I would get stuck and frustrated and wanted to call it a day, Bill would just be silent for a little bit, and I always knew his thinking face, so I could tell the project was not gonna end there. He always followed up with, "Let's try this." I believe this was something a lot of people experience with him. This just showed how he had the mentality of, the day is not over until I have accomplished what I set to do today. After he got diagnosed is where our life at home got more complicated. But for Bill, this was just something he had confidence he was going to overcome. He continued to be the hardest working man I have ever met. There was nothing that was going to stop him from doing what he loved. I always admired his ability to have a positive outlook on all aspects of life. From complications with his health to his business, he was always a problem solver, and he never stopped until he had it figured out. He always followed his gut, and it got him very far in life. I am thankful that I had a chance to meet and spend a lot of my younger years up until now with such an amazing person. I am forever going to be grateful for him and his family for opening their doors up for me and my family and making us part of theirs. Even though Bill is no longer physically with us, there is still a part of him that will always live on with all of us. From everything he built, like his business, what he did for the community, his friendships, and all the memories we all shared together with him, he was truly a person that made the world around him a better place. If I may, I'm going to repeat all that in Spanish because I have some family watching from Mexico. Yo primero conocí a Bill cuando estaba en la secundaria. Mi mamá y yo estábamos pasando por unos momentos difíciles. Bill, sin conocernos, nos abrió las puertas de su casa. También le dio trabajo a mi mamá para que nuestra situación se pudiera mejorar. Después de un tiempo me acuerdo que de la nada mi mamá y Bill a veces iban por mí juntos a recogerme de mi trabajo en la noche. Fue cuando dije, algo está pasando aquí. Esto fue cuando ellos empezaron a salir juntos y siendo un jovencito y muy apegado a mi mamá, tengo que admitir que me puse un poco celoso, pensando que me robaría a mi mami. Ahora cuando me acuerdo de eso me da risa de cómo manejé esa situación. Hasta tengo memoria de un día que me dijo que quería hablar personalmente y formalmente conmigo para decirme que le gustaba mucho mi mamá y quería estar con ella. Como el tiempo fue pasando, nuestra relación con él creció. Yo podía ver que mi mamá era muy feliz porque Bill le dio el respeto, amor y cariño que yo nunca había visto a nadie dárselo antes. Él me trató igual a mí. Siempre me cuidó y me dio consejos por todos los años que lo conocí hasta ahora. Yo lo veía como una figura paterna porque él me enseñó que siempre debes mostrarle respeto y cariño hacia toda la gente que me rodeaba y que en la vida tienes que trabajar muy duro para lograr todas tus metas. Nunca me voy a olvidar de todos los proyectos con los que le ayudé, hasta en los tiempos que me atoraba y me frustraba y ya quería dejar el proyecto. Bill se quedaba en silencio por un momento y me hacía la cara que hacía cuando se ponía a pensar en una solución y me daba cuenta que el proyecto todavía no se iba a acabar. Siempre me decía, a ver, hay que intentar esto. Yo creo que mucha gente había pasado momentos así con él. Esto nos enseñaba cómo él tenía la mentalidad de no darse por vencido hasta que había logrado lo que él quería hacer ese día. Después Después de que lo diagnosticaron, fue cuando nuestra vida en casa se puso más complicada. Pero para Bill esto solamente era algo que él sabía que iba a superar fácilmente. Él continuó siendo el hombre más trabajador que yo conozco. Nada iba a detener que hiciera lo que tanto amaba. Yo siempre admiré su habilidad de tener una actitud positiva en todos los aspectos de su vida, desde las complicaciones con su salud a su negocio. Él siempre quería resolver problemas y nunca se daba por vencido hasta que encontrara la solución. Él siempre siguió su instinto y lo llevó a cumplir todo lo que él se propone. Estoy tan agradecido de tener la oportunidad de conocer y pasar muchos años con una persona tan increíble como él. Y también siempre estaré agradecido con él y su familia por haber abierto las puertas de su casa para mí y mi familia y hacernos parte de la suya. Aunque Bill ya no esté físicamente con nosotros, hay parte de él que siempre vivirá. Desde el negocio que construyó, lo que hizo por la comunidad, sus amistades y todas las memorias que compartimos junto con él. Él era sinceramente una persona que hizo el mundo alrededor de él un mejor lugar.
Thank you very much. You said. Finally, we invite to share a few words Bill's daughter, Sarah.
My father was a big man. His hands were big. His tummy was big. His house was big. His presence in the communities and in our lives was big. Anything he built was big. But the love that he had for all of us here and all of us watching today was bigger. And as anyone who knew him can say, his plans were the biggest. But as I like to think these last couple of days, my dad was just too big for this world. But as with everything that is big, he had support. He didn't do it alone. My family and I are immensely appreciative. My family and I are immensely appreciative for everyone who loved him, our family, and the nursery. While we can't name everyone, I would like to acknowledge a few key people. My father's fellow business owners and nursery people, who very quickly turned into some of his greatest friends and biggest allies. His lifelong friends, including Marcel Miller, Jose Rajano, Phil and Larry Heron, Rob Johnson, Steve Witt, and Tom Van Tassel. His dear friend and advisor, Lisa Hall. His health manager and surrogate daughter, Jocelyn Raydecker Freitos. His holistic health team, Time, and Linda. His passionate healthcare advisor and advocate, Dr. Jacqueline Bougie. The expert medical teams at Scripps Anderson MD and Lightbridge Hospice, specifically Dr. Siegel, Frenette, Coe, Stemple, and nurses Cynthia, Daisy, Sandra, and Angie. For her wise counsel, Kristen Fritz. For her wonderful music, Dorothy Zevin. For help at a moment's notice, Vic Sharp. For providing a steady hand for decades, and now, Morris Lazard. With all his help for today's service, Rabbi Scott Meltzer. And for connecting us with those who could not be here today, Fale Lewis and Walter Seward. And for making the nursery continue through it all, our team, Lori, Tracy, Joe, Clayton, Francisco, Jeremy, Paul, Felix, Max, Jesus, Maria, and Chuck. I now need to acknowledge a few people personally. My brother-in-law, Eric Brown. For being a quiet and strong and steady but fun eldest brother for over half my life, almost. My sister-in-law, Janelle Dahl, who was first my friend and is now family. And although it is really weird for me to acknowledge the best little sister I didn't know I needed, her help with all of this has been absolutely remarkable. My sister Rebecca, who has guided me willingly and unwillingly to the life and the happiness that I know and enjoy today. I can confidently say that neither I or any of us here would be here today and in this moment without her. And finally, for my big brother Sam, who especially these last few weeks has known exactly when I need a laugh, a hug, a friend, or just the best big brother ever. He has fulfilled the role of a tall man in ways that those before him could not. And to my dad, who still had a lot left to teach me, but showed me so much. Just watch. Things are gonna be big.
Thank you. Beautifully said. There's a tradition. The soul that animates a human being, that sparkle, that wit, the intelligence, the love. It's not part of the physical body. It's infused into the body. That soul is visible. You can't see it. Tradition teaches that the words that are said in love, in memory, in honor, are bidei neshama. They become the clothing of the soul, as it were, to allow us to continue to see it as it journeys back beyond this world. Your dad is very well dressed as his soul continues its journeys. The words that were said, the love that was expressed, the way in which he was honored. So I have to say that his soul should be on its journey wearing suspenders. And that needs to be mentioned. There are people who look really good because of the clothing. And there are people who are truly beautiful because of how they wear that which they're given and that which they create in this world. This past week, yesterday, we celebrated what the tradition calls the birthday of the trees. See, from the very beginning, the tradition understands that the way life comes into this world is through the bounty, through the green, and the rest of the rainbow that is around us. That's why when we read the very beginning of our sacred books, the first thing that's done is the world, the dry land, and the trees. First things that done is God makes a garden. Because what could be a better place to put God's light, put human life, put our children in the garden. Gather together with great love and admiration and sadness as we honor and remember one of the great gardeners, There's a prayer that we recite for his soul. It acknowledges that it's on its journey back to that world. It's interesting. We pray that he should find a place of perfect rest. It's hard to imagine perfect rest, Bill. It should be a place of perfect activity, perfect workshop. That place that we imagine, the place to which the soul returns, is understood to be a majestic garden. And so as we turn to pray for this beautiful soul on its journey back to that garden, expecting souls for rest, and to say that garden's in for a treat. That there will be a new gardener with ideas of how things should grow, and that that world that we understand to be perfect is about to be made even more perfect because of the presence and the return of Bill's beautiful neshama. At this time, I would invite you, if you would, please rise as we offer a prayer for that beautiful soul, for its return back to that garden. I will share the prayer in English, and then I again invite Morris to share it with traditional Hebrew. O God, full of compassion, who dwells on high, find a place of perfect rest beneath the wings of your presence, along with the rising up of the holiest and the most pure, who shine like the brightest star of the firmament. To our beloved Father, brother, husband, and dear friend, Bill Tull, who has gone to his eternal rest. May it be for him as the Garden of Eden. Please, O Master of Mercy, shelter him in the shelter of your wings with no limits, and cause his soul to forever be connected to the bond of the living. For you are his portion. May he rest in peace. And together we say, Amen.
Amen.
El mole rachamim, shochen babromim, hamatzei menucha nechona, tachat kanfei hashchina, b'mahalot kedoshim u'tohorim, Kezoar horokia masirim, lenishmat velvo Ruven ben Nachum sholach leyolamo, vegan eden tehem menuchato, ana barachamim. Yastirehu b'seiter kinofecha leyolamim. Vitror bitrachayim et nishmato. Adonai hu nachalato. V'yanuach b'shalom ha'mizkabo. V'nomar
At this time, Bill's body is lovingly laid to rest. I invite everybody to take a moment in your own heads and your own heart to offer additional words of memory, additional words of prayer. time, I would like to invite the immediate family, if you would like to come forward to participate in the beginning of the Kvura, of the burial.
Come this way because you're good.
I'd like to invite the family to come and stand together. Eric, if it works in Janelle, please also. The words of the mourner's Kaddish can be found on the inside panel of the pamphlet. You know who needs it? You have another one? And I invite all those in mourning, please join with me and lead us in the mourner's Kaddish. Yit gadal, yisadash, shemei rabah, ve'amah, yibras, ve'uteh, ve'amrit ma'uteh, ve'chagehol, yonachon, adon, yachol, beit Yisrael,
Yaakov Yisrael. Amen.
Amen. Can I ask all of you to come and have a seat? And you guys can have a seat also. We have done what we can for the moment. Bill, for his neshama, for his soul, and for his body. Our attention now turns to his family. We all feel sadness. None more than you. There are moments in life where we do not have the words to make it all better. Were it only true that we could fix it. A loving word, if we could cure with a kiss and a boo-boo. The world's more complicated than that. Tradition wants us to be present and knows that often people say things with the best of intention that probably shouldn't be said. So there's a traditional line of comfort that essentially expresses that we care, that we are here, and that anything in the world that you need, that we are capable of providing. Just need to ask. And so in a minute I'm going to invite everybody, please repeat after me, in the traditional words of comfort, first in Hebrew and then in English. After that I'm going to invite you, again, maintaining distance between you and anybody else, to stretch back from here back towards the driveway. We create, by standing apart from each other, an alleyway, as it were, through which the mourners walk if they stand up from this site. It's a way by which we accompany them. Oh, absolutely. It is. Sarah asked me about everybody else, and having done that, everybody will have the opportunity who would choose to participate in the burial. Absolutely. Again, so I'm going to invite you to please share with me, repeat after me the traditional words of comfort, then to create an alleyway, as it were, and if you would choose to then participate in the burial, please do so. And then finally, we're called upon to be present and to care for the family. And when we leave from here, there's a whole lot more to part of the process. And for all of those who are close to Bill and close to his family, I know that we will continue to be present for them the coming days, the coming weeks and months, as appropriate to our relationships. Whether the nursery, by telephone, as they learn to adjust to living in this world that is radically different than the world has ever been before. I invite everybody to please direct your attention to those who are seated before us. And if you would please repeat after me as we share these traditional words of comfort. Hamakom Yenachem Etchem B'toch Sha'ar Avelei Zion V'Yerushalayim. May the place from which comfort comes bring comfort to you amongst all the mourners of Zion and Jerusalem. Amen. Sarah, would you rather sit here as others are invited, brother? Perfect. So rather than creating the alleyway of comfort, I would at this time invite everybody who would choose to participate in the burial. If you would like to come forward to do so now. And this marks the conclusion of our service. Please know that your presence today brings honor to Bill and comfort to his family. So you guys are now here for as long as you choose to be. I'm sorry that I must have miscommunicated before. Anything in the world that you need, that any of you need, do not be bashful. I don't know if Jillian reached you about providing meals. You are all more than welcome to come to services. It's all online. I think I didn't notice your dad sleeping next to you. Truthfully, there are people by their presence who alter the nature of our sanctuary. I happened to be in there last Shabbat for a service, just a couple of us in the building, and right here, kind of shallow left center field, or not so shallow, left center field, seated with some combination. I think that'll always be so always. Sincerely, whatever we can.
So if we can only give you guys 5 candles, your house, your sister's house, the aunt's house, yeah, their house. No matter how you do them or where you do them. I was like, that's so perfect. All that stuff. I was like, okay, now I want you to go. No problem. You guys take care. Go happy.